We want to dig deeper now into one of our top stories, and that is the legal battle over who should police America's southern border. The state of Texas and the federal government will be in a U.S. appeals court in the next few hours arguing over that very issue. Texas wants the power to arrest and even deport migrants, which is a job ordinarily reserved for the federal system, U.S. Border Patrol agents. Now, critics say that if the courts side with Texas, it will lead to racial profiling and, of course, would terrorize many of the migrants who live in Texas currently. Joining me now is Krish O'Mara Vignarajah. She is the president and CEO of Global Refuge, an organization that helps migrants build a life in the United States. Welcome to the program, Krish. I really appreciate your time. Look, I know you've been following this very closely, and your organization, as we said, works to empower and to welcome immigrants into this country. And of course, Texas recently passed a law that does exactly the opposite. I'm curious just to know what it's been like for you following this legal back and forth, really a whiplash of rulings on this Texas law.
I think legal whiplash is a great way to describe the past 48 hours. The law was in effect for a brief moment before, obviously, the Supreme Court weighed in, and then the Fifth Circuit got involved to pause the policy. It's unfortunate because we think that it is crystal clear that this law is not just illegal but unconstitutional, and it's difficult when you understand the human toll of how it impacts immigrants, because we know the chilling effect it will have. We had seen similar laws under the Trump administration, and we've also seen similar laws like in Arizona struck down. So we hope the legal system will intervene to put an end to SB 4.
Okay, so just to be clear, because of course I'm sure there are people at home who are confused about what is happening. So an appeals court right now has prevented from enforcing, allowing Texas to enforce this strict new immigration law that gives local police agencies the power to arrest migrants and, of course, deport them as well. You, Krish, mentioned the human toll. Let's talk more about that, because the arguments are going to take place again in the federal appeals court system. It is very likely that this will be kicked back to the Supreme Court. What are your concerns if this law were allowed to go into effect in Texas?
Our fear is that it will spark an incredible amount of worry, people who are hesitating to even access basic human services within immigrant communities. And as a provider serving those communities, as you mentioned, we at Global Refuge are very concerned about the fallout. Remember that SB 4 allows authorities to arrest anyone suspected of illegal entry. And that dynamic certainly opens the door to racial profiling, particularly since this law is enforceable anywhere in Texas's 254 counties, not just at the border itself. And so that's poised to create a chilling effect that will discourage people from cooperating with law enforcement, which jeopardizes the cohesion of communities as a whole.
Yeah, and of course it begs the question, well, if you can arrest anyone based on suspicions of being in Texas illegally or in the country illegally, what will you base your suspicions on? Will it be based on just how somebody looks? In terms of precedent, because again, regarding this legal back and forth, after the law was signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, there was a federal judge at the district level who blocked the government from implementing the law. And he said that it could open the door to each state passing its own version of immigration laws. And it seems like that's what we're seeing, because Iowa, I mean, the timing is uncanny, but this Midwestern state also passed a similar bill just yesterday on Tuesday. So again, there's also this concern of a patchwork of immigration laws that could be passed by various states, potentially Republican ones.
It is political season, and so this is where it isn't surprising that you do see more states that are going to try to enact similar provisions. SB 4 and those types of provisions are deeply troubling because it isn't a transparent attempt to trigger a constitutional crisis. The U.S. Constitution and hundreds of years of precedent are crystal clear. Immigration authority unambiguously belongs to the federal government. And so if each state were allowed to implement their own immigration laws, we would have complete and utter chaos. And I think that's where it's important to understand that previous attempts like show us through papers laws, they failed. The Supreme Court ultimately struck that down in 2012. So we know this law is going to be litigated for some time. We're hopeful that the courts will ultimately recognize it for what it is, which is a blatantly unconstitutional effort that plays politics with the lives of desperate people.
Krish O'Mara Vignarajah, I really hope we can have you back as this is continually playing out over the next weeks and months with Global Refuge. Thank you so much for your time.
For having me.